Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. Charles Krauthammer wrote an important column last week titled "The Wages of Weakness." That was from March 6th. And in it, he was sounding the alarm over America's disastrous foreign policy toward Russia. Let's review the history between the United States and Russia just over the past few years. At the end of President Bush's presidency, relations with Russia were strained. Why was that? Well, because Russia's attack on Georgia had signaled the beginning of a dangerous new era in history. But in 2009, President Obama hit the reset button on Russia. He normalized relations in exchange for nothing. Now, that same year, America promised Russia that it would reduce its nuclear arsenal by 1/3. President Obama also decided to scrap America's missile defense agreement with Poland and the Czech Republic, and he did so without even consulting with the Poles or the Czechs. America just left its allies in Eastern Europe completely exposed to a resurgent Soviet Russia. Now, this represented another huge concession to Vladimir Putin, and one where America, once again, received nothing in return. Now, at the time, the Trumpet.com noted a Telegraph article from August 29th, 2009. The author, Niall Gardner, realized back then that dropping the missile defense plan was an appalling surrender to Russian demands. It was a shameful appeasement, he said, of an increasingly aggressive regime that was trying to intimidate ex-members of the Warsaw Pact. This deal, he said, would send a clear message to America's allies in Europe that it would tolerate and even tacitly encourage Russia to expand its sphere of influence. Gardner also noted that this would send a signal that the United States would not stand up to Russian demands on Georgia and also the Ukraine, he said. Now, how prophetic that warning turned out to be. Now, fast forward to 2012, just a couple of years ago, and who can forget the embarrassing live mic comment that President Obama made to Dmitry Medvedev? The U.S. president said that after the election, he would have more flexibility, basically to accommodate Russian demands. And then there was the red line in Syria. President Obama said if Bashar al-Assad's use of chemical weapons was put on his own people, that would trigger U.S. military intervention. But then Assad crossed that red line and America did nothing. And guess who then took control of the situation? Of all people, it was Vladimir Putin. With this failure to act, Charles Krauthammer wrote, President Obama conferred priceless legitimacy on Bashar al-Assad and made Russia the major regional arbiter for the first time in 40 years. Now, you add all of these developments to the administration's plan, this recent plan that was announced, to cut spending on defense, to downsize the U.S. Army to its smallest size since before World War II. This is what America is doing. Even as Russia rebuilds and goes on the offensive, even as Iran completes its nuclear bomb, even as China increases its military spending by about 12%. And so when you step back and look at the big picture, is it really that big of a surprise that Vladimir Putin would audaciously invade Crimea and threaten the pro-Western government in Kiev? Why not, he's thinking. Isn't it painfully obvious that America is simply not willing to stop Putin's push? The question is, will anyone stop Vladimir Putin's Russia?
The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Three weeks ago, we interviewed Trumpet correspondent Brad McDonald from the UK, and it was toward the end of the Winter Olympics where Vladimir Putin basically announced to the world that Russia is back. And if you remember from that interview with Mr. McDonald, he said it would be interesting to see what Putin does about the ongoing Ukraine crisis after the Olympics. Well, we all saw what happened. As soon as the games were over, Russia invaded Crimea in the Ukraine there. Now, as I said earlier, America's weakness practically invited Russia to make this bold move. America's will is broken, and this broken will has been brought on by the sins of the American people, as I noted last week on the Trumpet Daily. God said that because of our many sins, I will break the pride of your power. That's in Leviticus 26:19. The United States simply does not have the will to stand up to Putin's Russia. But Europe soon will. And that's what we've been preparing you for these last few months. Europe's offensive stand against Russia, it's coming. And it's going to be led by Germany. Let me just show you what was in the New York Times this week. This is from March the 12th. In the Times, it says, in confronting the limits of her personal diplomacy, Ms. Merkel is not just at a potential turning point in the Ukraine crisis, but also in her own nation's decades-long debate over how assertive a role to play on the world stage. It says the nations of Eastern Europe, with Russia looming large over them, are pressing her to be stronger in confronting Mr. Putin. That's what we've been noting here in the last several weeks, how that Putin's belligerence, his aggression, it's going to press Europe to act. It says the United States continues to push for more tangible steps than Germany and the rest of the European Union have been willing to embrace so far. As I said, we've been making this point quite a lot recently, and it's because of how important it is, these developments. It's because of how important it is for us to understand the significance of these events that we're witnessing. So much Bible prophecy is being fulfilled. America's in a geopolitical freefall, and Russia's back. The great Soviet Empire is on the march, and Europe is scrambling to rise in defense. What does it all mean? Where is it all leading? Let's look over at Daniel 8. Read just a couple of verses here, and I'll refer you to Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, our booklet on the subject of this history, this important history that we should know because it's connected to so many latter-day prophecies. We'll talk more about that booklet at the end of the program. But as my father has said so many times before, if you look at the empire, and never mind what the skeptics might say, that Europe's falling apart, it's not going to work out. The empire is there. Daniel 2 says it would be a conglomerate of iron, strong iron and clay. There's strength and there's weakness, but it's going to come together for an incredible show of strength in fulfillment of so many Bible prophecies. And it's going to be led by a strong man. That's all that's missing, as my father has said repeatedly. The empire's there, it's just missing the emperor. And in Daniel 11, it talks about him coming in as a result of flatteries. He's going to be a smooth talker, a very charismatic fellow. And here, Daniel 8, starting in verse 24, notice it says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. So this is referring to a strong man that's going to lead the resurrected Roman Empire out of the heart of Europe. Now, Russia has its prophesied strong man. He's prophesied, as my father's been saying, over in Ezekiel 38. Russia has its man, and Europe will soon have its Putin, so to speak, its strong man. And when that man appears, as Daniel 8 brings out here, he's going to destroy wonderfully. That's what the Bible says. And there's going to be, as verse 24 just pointed out, there's going to be a far greater power behind this man than just the simple human spirit. There is a real spirit world, as we know, verse 25 here. It says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. By peace he's going to destroy many. So many prophecies, as I say, being fulfilled right here at the crisis of the close. I mean, the whole world's going to be drawn into this conflict. And how can you look at what's happening and not come to that conclusion? Even if you don't really believe the prophecies of God. Look at these major world powers at play here. And all these little tiny nations caught in the crosshairs. Whether you look at the Middle East or now Eastern Europe. And yet these massive movements pushing in every direction. Whether it's China in Southeast Asia or Russia there in Eastern Europe, or Iran in the Middle East, and Europe soon to be out of the heart of Europe. And all the while, America's in a free fall, just an absolute free fall. It's stunning how fast it's all happening. And that's why we have to keep repeating so many of these prophecies, because so much of the Bible, so much of Bible prophecy is for our time today. And Mr. Armstrong before us talked about many of these things for decades. And now we see them being fulfilled. We'll be right back.
It could have been prevented, in my belief, without the firing of a single shot. And Germany might be powerful, prosperous, and honored today. But no one would listen. And one by one we were all sucked into the awful whirlpool. Surely, ladies and gentlemen, I put it to you, surely we must not let that happen again.
World War I erupted in 1914, and then led by Germany, and then World War II erupted in 1939, led by Germany, and your Bible says World War III is going to erupt, and again, Germany is going to lead the world into World War III. There is one prophecy in your Bible that explains all of this, and you need to understand it. Notice Revelation 17 and verse 10. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. It is talking about the Holy Roman Empire. That is, these Roman empires resurrected under the successive leadership of Justinian, AD 554, Charlemagne in AD 800, Otto the Great in AD 962, Charles V, 1530, and Napoleon in 1804. And then came the Hitler-Mussolini head, number 6, or the one that is. Now the other has come. Now the final head is here and everybody can see it. History is going to repeat itself because prophecy says so. We have a booklet on Germany and the Holy Roman Empire that will explain all of this.
In response to Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg co-wrote an article with the former defense minister of Poland titled "Disrupting Putin's Game Plan." You can see a screenshot of it there. The article was posted on March the 7th, and it's a pretty bold response to what Putin is doing. In the article, he calls Putin a paranoiac and said that he's guided by visions of restored imperial glory. Just want to give you a few excerpts from that article. And again, this is Gutenberg writing with this former Polish defense minister. Here is a leader who read a hidden, menacing agenda, he's talking about Putin here, into a technical European Union document about export subsidies and anti-fraud provisions. More broadly, here is a paranoiac who sees an implausible coalition of liberal Russians, Ukrainian fascists, the CIA, and Islamist terrorists trying to thwart his preferences, if not topple him, at every turn. So Putin's paranoid, he says, and yet he goes on to say that this is a very thorough, well-planned and detailed plan of attack that Putin's Russia has for Crimea, Ukraine, and so on. Continuing in the quote, it says, "Indeed, what we're seeing is not an unfortunate overreaction to recent events, but a result of meticulous preparation." I mean, he's been preparing for this. Gutenberg says armies do not mobilize 150,000 troops within days or have vehicles and thousands of uniforms without insignias ready or hold military exercises in peaceful regions of the world without warning. These things don't just happen, he's pointing out. This has been a plan. It's been in the works for some time. And as he goes on to say, the West needs to be prepared to take action. Now, when you read the West now, you have to read that with the understanding that the United States is not going to do a thing. And so who will? Who will stand up to this? Well, that's what we've been telling you. Continuing in the article, Crimea has been turned into a military zone, and its inhabitants might soon find themselves trapped in the firing line if the crisis continues to escalate. Russians now face international diplomatic and economic isolation, thus exacerbating their country's economic woes. And Russian President Vladimir Putin's reckless gamble risks dragging the world into a wider conflict. In light of Putin's dangerous behavior, the West must rethink its stance toward him. Notice that. The West must rethink its stance. No talk of a reset here. Now is the time to stand up to this aggression. Now is the time to rethink our stance with respect to Russia. That's what this German commentator, this former German politician, defense minister, is saying. Now, this view was echoed by Frank Walter Steinmeier just recently. He's the German foreign minister. He said on March 11th, just this week, he said, if the weekend passes, that's talking about the weekend that's upcoming, if the weekend passes without a visible change in Russia's conduct, then on Monday in the European Council, we will have to discuss a next stage of measures. This is Steinmeier. He says, we don't want confrontation, but the action of the Russian side, unfortunately, makes it necessary for us to prepare. We don't want confrontation, but we better prepare for it, because it's looking more and more like Russia's leader is being unreasonable and that he's not going to respond to diplomacy. See, these men, these leaders in Germany, they know what Putin's up to. And furthermore, they know what Germany itself recently announced just in January, that it was going to take a bolder, more strong approach to its foreign policy. And now they're coming forward urging Germany to do exactly that. You talk about a perfect excuse for Germany to act on its foreign policy pivot from January. Putin provides them with that perfect excuse. Meanwhile, you have all the world, Poland, the United States, everyone in Europe is urging Germany to be more assertive, to take a bolder stance. Now, when you understand history, even recent history, do you think that's really the wise way to go? In any event, I mean, what we're here to help you see is what God says about it, what the Bible prophesies. That's what we're trying to help shed light on here so that you can understand what's coming. We highlighted this in our recent Trumpet magazine about that foreign policy pivot in Germany, going back to that Munich conference in January, where German leaders, the German president, Joachim Gauck, he got up and said that Germany hasn't been doing enough in the world. And he called on Germany to play a larger role in world affairs, in the global theater. And this was a speech, Gauck's speech, that Gutenberg referenced, even in his article. This is going back to Theodor zu Gutenberg's article from March 7th. He said, some EU members, like Germany, must live up to the expectations that have recently raised. German leaders are serious about instituting a culture of responsibility. They are obliged to act accordingly, even if doing so entails economic cost. I mean, even if there are costs, we've got to be willing to follow through on what we've said we will do. We've got to act on what we've said. Richard Palmer posted an article just the other day on the Ukraine crisis and how the world is waiting on Germany. And he noted in his article that this crisis has clearly shown that it's Germany, not the United States, that's leading the free world, at least when it comes to dealing with Russia. In his article here, he highlights several recent headlines. Spiegel Online, Angela Merkel plays central role in Russia diplomacy over Crimea. That's Germany playing a central role in this world crisis. Another headline, The New Yorker, Ukraine crisis, keep your eyes on Angela Merkel. And then here's a third one, foreign policy. Germany is now the pivotal player in the Ukraine crisis, and the world is watching. The world is watching. Germany's the pivotal player. Where is this leading? Wow. If only Mr. Armstrong was still around today to see what's unfolding, given what he talked about back in the 1950s and the 1960s. Who could have ever imagined back then, back when Western leaders assured the world that a resurgent Germany would never rise again, not like the one that came on the scene in the 1930s. It's pretty amazing to watch. That last one there, the foreign policy piece, just to give you a quote from the article itself. It says, not so long ago, of course, it would have been the United States calling the shots, with Germany following along like the humble, reliable ally it had been. But the tables are turned. Now think on this. Think on the meaning here, the significance. Not very long ago, just a few short years ago, it would have been the U.S. calling the shots. But now the tables have turned. This isn't the trumpet. This isn't the plain truth. This is foreign policy. Now the tables have turned. Washington is paying the price for having neglected Europe for years, tapping the phones of the continent's leaders rather than engaging them in serious consultation and policy making. A little dig there at the phone tapping controversy from a while back. Now going back to that article that Mr. Palmer wrote at thetrumpet.com, he said, so far the EU has proven itself to be unable to deal with such significant crises just because they haven't had the kind of political unity or will that they've needed. And that's why you see Germany coming to the fore. And you combine that, the world urging Germany along, you combine that with that foreign policy pivot that Germany took back in January. And boy, these are significant times in which we are living. Gutenberg's piece, he goes on to point out how important Poland's role is. You see those nations in Eastern Europe, they're scared at this belligerent Russia. And you see them drawing closer now to Germany. This is a quote from the Gutenberg piece again. He said, the West should also listen carefully to Ukraine's neighbor, Poland, which probably has the deepest insight into the complexities of the crisis. You'll recall, as I said earlier, that the co-author of this article was the former defense minister of Poland. And just to refer to you to another article by Richard Palmer, Ukraine crisis reveals Europe's eastern leg. The eastern leg. The Bible prophesies that there would be two legs in this resurgent Roman Empire. You have the west and then you have the east. And Poland's along that eastern leg. And you need to go to thetrumpet.com and look up this article and see how, again, this prophecy is being fulfilled. A couple more quotes from the Gutenberg piece. He says, this is a time for diplomacy, and NATO must try to avoid direct confrontation, but not at all costs. Sure, be diplomatic. Try diplomacy first, but it's not a diplomacy at all costs. It says, it must reckon that Russia's actions might deliberately run counter to a peaceful settlement. That's basically saying Putin's actions might run counter to some kind of diplomatic settlement. And we've got to be prepared for it. We've got to get ready for more Russian belligerence. The article concludes, when Ukrainians stood up against their corrupt elite, They became the first people to put their lives on the line for the goal of EU membership. The result was unwarranted retaliation from Russia. Here again, these are strong words, a pretty bold response coming from Gutenberg. So this is not Ukraine's war, he writes. Ukraine is the immediate victim, but it is by no means Putin's ultimate target. They know what Putin's up to. They know where he's headed. They know that this aggression will continue until someone faces him down. This is a blatant attack on the principles of state sovereignty, Gutenberg writes, inviolability of negotiated borders, and adherence to multilateral agreements that underpin today's rule-based international system. He says countering Russia's aggression is thus the responsibility of all who would uphold that system. So someone's got to stand up to him. Someone's got to counter this. This is not just an attack on Ukraine, Gutenberg says. He's coming toward Europe, specifically that eastern leg that the Bible talks about in Daniel chapter 2. Well, I mentioned this booklet, Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. This really gives you all of the critical history together with these many prophecies that we refer to on this program and on the Key of David and at thetrumpet.com frequently. Make sure that you go to thetrumpet.com and download this today, or you can call the number on your screen, or you can go to thetrumpet.com and order your copy online. We'll send out a free hard copy to you. We want you to study this, to understand the history and the prophecy, because they go right together. What we're witnessing is that seventh and final resurrection of that Holy Roman Empire, right out of the heart of Europe, spearheaded by that old Assyrian spirit. Modern day Germany. So make sure you get this powerful booklet, Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on the Trumpet Daily.